Hello guys, welcome back to Clara Vayne. I have a new Reddit story for you guys today. If you watch this video then you become a genius in this world. But before we start, if you want a shout out in my next video, just comment your name below. And trust me, after hearing this story, you're probably gonna question how well you actually know your own family. So yeah, let's get into it. I found out my entire life was built on a lie 3 weeks after my 16th birthday, and the worst part is, my parents almost got away with it forever. The crazy thing is, the secret didn't come out during some dramatic family fight or emotional confession. It started because of a stupid school project. That's it. One boring biology assignment completely destroyed my life. My teacher told us we had to create a family medical history chart because we were learning about inherited diseases and genetics. Everybody in class was joking around about who probably inherited anger issues or bad eyesight from their parents, and honestly, I didn't think much about it. I remember texting my mom during lunch asking if heart disease ran in the family, and she instantly replied, "We'll talk about it at home." That should have been my first warning sign because my mom never acted weird about normal questions. But when I got home that day, the energy in the house felt off immediately. It was dead quiet. My dad was sitting at the kitchen table staring at absolutely nothing while my mom kept wiping the same clean counter over and over again like she was trying not to panic. The second I mentioned the assignment, both of them froze. Like literally froze. My dad slowly looked at my mom, and I swear I felt my stomach drop before anybody even spoke. Then my mom forced this fake smile and said, "Honey, maybe you can just tell your teacher you're uncomfortable sharing family information." I laughed because I thought she was joking, but neither of them laughed back. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. I kept asking simple questions, but they started acting defensive for no reason. My dad suddenly snapped, "Why does your school even need that information?" And my mom kept interrupting me every time I tried to speak. The whole thing felt so bizarre that I honestly started wondering if someone in our family secretly had cancer or something horrible they were hiding from me. But then I noticed my dad's hands shaking. My dad never shook. This was the same man who stayed calm during hurricanes, job losses, and even when our car caught fire once on the highway. Seeing him nervous terrified me. I remember saying, "Okay, what is happening right now?" and nobody answered me for like 10 full seconds. Then my mom sat down slowly and looked like she was about to cry. My chest got tight instantly because I thought somebody was dying. But instead, she whispered something that completely changed my life. She said, "There's something we should have told you a long time ago." I swear my heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then my dad quietly added, "And you can't tell anyone until we explain everything." The second he said that, fear hit me so hard I almost couldn't breathe. Kids don't realize this until it happens, but when your parents suddenly act scared of you finding something out, it changes the entire atmosphere around them. They stop feeling safe. They stop feeling like parents. They start feeling like strangers. Then my mom looked me directly in the eyes and said, "We're not your biological parents." And honestly, for a few seconds, I genuinely thought they were joking. I even laughed a little because my brain literally refused to process what she just said. But my mom started crying immediately, and my dad looked completely broken. That's when reality hit me like a truck. I remember standing up so fast my chair slammed into the floor behind me. My ears were ringing. I kept saying, "What are you talking about?" over and over again while my mom tried reaching for my hand. I pulled away so fast it made her cry harder. Then my dad told me to sit down because there was more. More? I could barely process the first part. My whole body felt numb. I kept looking around the kitchen thinking maybe this was some insane prank or maybe I was dreaming. But then my dad walked into his office and came back holding a folder. Inside it were papers, old hospital records, and photos I had never seen before. There was a picture of a woman holding a baby in a hospital bed, and that baby was me. But the woman wasn't my mom. I knew instantly because they looked nothing alike. The woman in the picture had dark curly hair and this tiny tattoo near her collarbone. My mom doesn't even have tattoos. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the photo. I looked at them and whispered, "Who is she?" And the silence after that question felt horrifying. My mom started sobbing so hard she couldn't even speak properly anymore, so my dad finally told me the truth. Or at least, part of the truth. He explained that my biological mother was my mom's younger sister. My aunt. Except apparently she died shortly after I was born because of a drug overdose. I felt sick instantly because I had never heard anybody mention her before. Not once. It was like she never existed. My dad said my biological father disappeared before I was born and nobody knew where he went. Then after my aunt died, my parents adopted me legally and decided to raise me as their own child. He kept saying things like, "We did it because we loved you, and you are our daughter no matter what," but honestly, I barely heard any of it because my brain got stuck on one thing. 16 years. 16 years. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every family photo. Every single time I called them mom and dad, they knew the truth and hid it from me. I suddenly started questioning every memory I ever had. Was everybody lying to me? Did my grandparents know too? Did family friends know? Was I the only idiot in my own life? I remember asking one question that instantly changed the room again. I said, "If she was your sister, why did nobody ever talk about her?" My dad immediately looked uncomfortable, but my mom looked terrified. Then she quietly said, "Because what happened destroyed the family." That answer only made me angrier. I wanted details. Real details. But every time I asked something specific, they got weirdly vague. My biological mom struggled with addiction. My grandparents cut contact with her. She got pregnant unexpectedly. She died young. End of story. It sounded rehearsed. Like they had practiced this version 1,000 times. And maybe that's what bothered me most. Nothing felt natural. Nothing felt honest. Even their sadness felt controlled somehow. Then I asked to see more pictures of my biological mother, and my mom hesitated. Hesitated. Before saying they didn't have many. That's when something deep inside me started screaming that they still weren't telling me everything. The next few days were absolute hell. I stopped eating properly. I barely slept. Every time my parents tried acting normal, it pissed me off more because how do you act normal after dropping something like that on your kid? I started staring at myself in mirrors trying to figure out which features came from strangers. I kept noticing little things that suddenly made sense. Why I didn't look like either of my parents. Why my grandparents sometimes got emotional on my birthdays. Why family conversations always got awkward whenever the topic of "before I was born" came up. I felt like my entire identity had been ripped away overnight. And the worst part? I couldn't even talk about it with my friends because my parents begged me not to tell anyone yet. They said the truth was complicated and they wanted time to explain things carefully. But honestly, that only made me more suspicious. Because if the story was simple, why were they so scared? Then one night, everything got even worse. I woke up around 2 a.m. because I heard voices downstairs. At first I thought I was imagining things, but then I heard my mom crying again. I quietly walked halfway down the stairs and heard my dad say something that made my blood run cold. He said, "If she finds the letters, we're screwed." My heart literally stopped. Letters? What letters? Then my mom whispered, "Maybe we should finally tell her the whole truth before someone else does." And my dad immediately snapped, "No. Absolutely not." I remember gripping the stair railing so tightly my hands hurt. In that moment, I realized something horrifying. The secret they told me wasn't the full secret. Not even close. And whatever they were still hiding was apparently bad enough to terrify both of them after 16 years. I slowly went back to my room pretending I never heard anything, but I didn't sleep at all that night. My brain kept replaying those words over and over. If she finds the letters, we're screwed. What letters? Who wrote them? And why would they ruin everything? The next morning my parents acted completely normal again, which honestly made me sick. My mom made pancakes like nothing happened while my dad asked me about school. I just sat there staring at them thinking, who even are you people? Then my mom smiled nervously and asked if I was feeling better about everything. That fake calmness pushed me over the edge. I looked her directly in the eyes and said, "You're still lying to me." The color instantly disappeared from her face. My dad stopped moving completely. And right there, before either of them could answer, somebody knocked on our front door. And when my dad opened it, I saw a woman standing there holding a thick envelope in her hands while my parents looked absolutely terrified. The woman standing at our front door looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her blonde hair was messy, her mascara was smudged under her eyes, and she kept clutching the envelope against her chest like someone might try to steal it from her. But the scariest part wasn't her appearance. It was my parents' reaction. My mom literally stumbled backward when she saw her, and my dad's face went completely pale. I had never seen fear hit somebody that fast before. For a second nobody spoke. The entire house felt frozen. Then the woman looked directly at me and quietly said, "You probably don't know who I am." My stomach twisted instantly. My dad quickly stepped between us and snapped, "This is not the time." But the woman ignored him completely. Her eyes stayed locked on mine as she said, "My name is Rachel. I was your biological mother's best friend." The second she said that, I felt like all the air disappeared from the room. My mom immediately started panicking. She kept saying, "You need to leave right now," while my dad lowered his voice into that dangerous calm tone parents use when they're furious but trying not to explode. But Rachel didn't move. She just held up the envelope and said, "She deserves to know the truth." That sentence hit me harder than anything else because suddenly all the alarms in my head started going off at once. The truth. Not a truth. The truth. Meaning the story my parents told me still wasn't real. I remember looking at my dad and saying, "What is she talking about?" But he wouldn't even look at me. That hurt more than yelling would've. Then Rachel slowly handed me the envelope. My dad tried grabbing it before I could take it, but I pulled it away first. I'll never forget the look on his face in that moment. Pure panic. Not guilt. Not sadness. Panic. Like he knew everything was about to fall apart. Inside the envelope were old photographs, folded papers, and several handwritten letters with my name on them. My hands started trembling immediately because the handwriting looked rushed and emotional, like somebody had written them while crying. The top letter had a date from 16 years ago. I looked up at Rachel and whispered, "What is this?" And before she could answer, my mom suddenly broke down screaming. Actually screaming. She grabbed my arm and begged me not to read them yet. "Please," she kept saying. "Please don't do this right now." But it was too late. At that point I didn't trust them anymore. Honestly, I don't even think I saw them as my parents in that moment. I saw them as people hiding something from me. Something huge. So I opened the first letter right there in the hallway while everyone stood around me in complete silence. I started reading faster while my mom cried harder and harder in the background. My biological mother wrote about constant fights with my parents after I was born. She claimed my mom became obsessed with raising me herself because she thought she couldn't have children naturally anymore. Apparently my parents offered to temporarily care for me while my biological mother went through rehab, but according to the letter, things became manipulative afterward. She wrote that they isolated her from me, ignored her calls, and slowly convinced the rest of the family she was dangerous. Then came the line that shattered me completely. I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. And if they tell you I abandoned you, they're lying. I remember lowering the letter because I genuinely thought I was about to throw up. My dad quietly said, "You don't understand the situation," but I snapped so hard I barely recognized my own voice. I screamed, "Then explain it." At that point everything exploded. My dad started yelling back, saying my biological mother was unstable and couldn't be trusted. Rachel immediately screamed at him, she was getting clean, while my mom sobbed uncontrollably at the kitchen table. I stood there in the middle of all of it feeling like my brain was splitting apart. Every version of the story contradicted another version. I didn't know who was lying anymore. Then Rachel said something that changed everything again. She looked directly at me and said, "Your mother didn't overdose accidentally." The entire room went dead silent. Even my mom stopped crying for a second. My chest tightened instantly. "What?" I whispered. Rachel swallowed hard and said, "The night she died, she was supposed to meet a lawyer the next morning to start fighting for custody." My dad immediately shouted, "That is enough," louder than I had ever heard in my entire life. But Rachel kept going. She said my biological mother believed somebody intentionally gave her drugs knowing she had been sober for months. I remember feeling actual fear crawl through my body because suddenly this wasn't just family drama anymore. This felt dark. Really dark. I wanted to believe Rachel was exaggerating, but then I noticed something terrifying. My parents weren't calling her crazy. They weren't denying specific details. They just kept saying things like, "You don't know the full story," and "This is unfair." That's when I realized there probably was a full story, and nobody wanted me to hear it. My dad finally ordered Rachel to leave, but before she walked out, she looked at me one last time and said, "There's another letter hidden in the envelope. Read it when you're alone." Then she left. Just like that. The second the front door closed, my mom completely collapsed emotionally. She kept saying, "We loved you so much," over and over again while trying to grab my hands, but I couldn't even look at her anymore. All I could think about was that sentence from the letter. "They never intended to give you back." That night was the first time I ever locked my bedroom door against my parents. I sat on the floor shaking while rereading the letters over and over again. Part of me wanted to believe my parents because they were the people who raised me. They were there for every nightmare, every school concert, every sickness, every birthday. But another part of me couldn't ignore how guilty they looked. And the more I thought about it, the more tiny memories started feeling suspicious. Times my mom got weirdly emotional whenever I mentioned wanting independence. Times my dad acted overprotective to the point of control. Times relatives suddenly went quiet when I entered rooms during family gatherings. It was like puzzle pieces clicking together in the worst possible way. Then I found the second letter Rachel mentioned. It was folded deep inside the envelope underneath the photos. Unlike the first letter, this one looked rushed and messy, like my biological mother wrote it in panic. The date on top was only 2 days before her death. I started reading, and within seconds I felt ice run through my veins. She wrote that she was scared. Terrified, actually. She claimed someone had been following her recently and that she thought my parents were trying to keep her away from me permanently. Then came the sentence that nearly stopped my heart. "If anything happens to me, don't trust your father." My father. Not your adoptive father. Just father. At first I thought maybe she meant my biological dad, but then I kept reading. She mentioned arguments with Mark. That was my dad's name. I remember staring at the page unable to breathe properly. My brain kept trying to reject what I was reading because the idea sounded insane. My dad wasn't some criminal mastermind. He coached my soccer games. He made pancakes every Sunday. He cried during Disney movies. But then why hide the letters? Why lie for 16 years? Why panic every time the truth got close? I suddenly realized I didn't actually know what my parents were capable of before I was born. Kids grow up thinking their parents existed exactly as they know them now, but adults have entire lives before children ever see them. Entire secrets. Entire versions of themselves. The next morning my parents were gone. Both of them. No note. No text. Nothing. Their cars were missing, and the house felt eerily silent. I instantly panicked because after everything that happened, their disappearance felt terrifying. I tried calling them repeatedly, but neither answered. Then I noticed something sitting on the kitchen counter. A small white paper with only one sentence written on it in my dad's handwriting. Do not contact Rachel again. That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just a warning. And that's when I made the worst decision of my life. I called Rachel. And when she answered, the first thing she said was, "You need to leave that house right now before your parents come back." The second Rachel said that, my chest tightened so hard I could barely speak. I remember gripping my phone and whispering, "What are you talking about?" while staring at the empty kitchen around me. The house suddenly didn't feel like home anymore. It felt staged. Like every wall around me was hiding something ugly. Rachel lowered her voice and said, "Your parents know I gave you those letters. And if your father thinks I'm turning you against him, things are going to get really bad." I immediately got angry because at that point everyone was speaking in vague dramatic warnings instead of actual facts. I snapped, "Can somebody please stop talking like this is some crime documentary and just tell me the truth?" There was a long silence on the phone before Rachel quietly said, "Okay, then you need to hear what really happened the night your mother died." Even now, thinking about that conversation still makes me feel sick. Rachel told me my biological mother had been sober for almost 6 months before she died. According to her, rehab was actually working. She had a job lined up in another state, she was meeting with lawyers about shared custody, and she had been secretly recording arguments with my parents because she believed they were manipulating the situation. Rachel claimed my biological mother was terrified of losing me forever. But then, only days before the custody meeting, she suddenly relapsed and overdosed at a party she almost didn't even attend. Rachel said none of it made sense because my biological mother hated being around drugs after rehab. Then she told me something that made my stomach twist instantly. "Your dad was there that night." I literally stopped breathing for a second. "What?" I whispered. Rachel said my dad showed up unexpectedly at the party hours before the overdose happened. According to witnesses, he and my biological mother had a massive fight outside. Then later that night she was found unconscious in a bathroom. I immediately said, "That doesn't prove anything," because honestly, part of me was desperate to defend him. But Rachel sounded frustrated. She said, "I know it doesn't prove it. But after she died, your parents suddenly had full custody, the family stopped asking questions, and every single piece of evidence disappeared." My head was spinning so badly I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. None of this sounded real anymore. It sounded like one of those insane true crime stories people binge watch online at 2 a.m. But this was my family. My life. My parents. Rachel then asked me something that caught me completely off guard. "Have you ever wondered why your grandparents barely talk to your dad anymore?" I froze because she was right. My grandparents always acted polite toward him, but never warm. Never close. I used to think that was just personality differences, but suddenly all those awkward family dinners flashed through my head differently. My grandma avoiding eye contact with my dad. My grandpa getting tense whenever old family stories came up. The weird silence whenever my biological mother's name was almost mentioned. It all felt different now. The second my parents walked inside, the tension felt unbearable. My mom looked exhausted like she'd been crying for hours, but my dad looked cold. Controlled. Focused. He saw me standing in the kitchen and immediately asked, "Did you contact Rachel?" My stomach dropped because his voice sounded completely different than usual. Not angry exactly. Just sharp. Careful. Like every word mattered. I lied and said no, but I could tell instantly he didn't believe me. He stared at me for a few seconds before quietly saying, "You don't understand how dangerous she is." Dangerous. That word echoed in my head because everyone suddenly kept calling everyone dangerous. I finally exploded emotionally. I started yelling that I was tired of secrets and half-truths and manipulative conversations. I screamed, "Did you steal me from my real mother?" The look on my mom's face completely shattered me. She started sobbing instantly while my dad looked like somebody punched him in the chest. Then something happened I never expected. My mom suddenly screamed at my dad. "We should have told her years ago." The entire room went silent. My dad immediately snapped back, "And destroy her childhood? Is that what you wanted?" They started arguing right in front of me like I wasn't even there anymore. My mom kept crying and saying things like, "She deserves the truth," while my dad insisted they protected me. But then my mom yelled one sentence that changed everything again. "You promised me nobody would get hurt." My blood ran cold. My dad immediately looked at me like he regretted everything the second the words left her mouth. And in that moment, I realized my mom was scared of him too. I backed away slowly because suddenly the entire room felt unsafe. My dad tried calming things down, saying my mom was emotional and didn't mean it like that, but the damage was already done. I could literally feel paranoia creeping into my brain. Every normal memory of my dad started twisting into something darker. His temper. His need for control. The way everybody in the family avoided confrontation with him. Then I remembered the second letter. "Don't trust your father." My heart started pounding uncontrollably. My dad noticed me panicking and stepped toward me, but I flinched instinctively. The look on his face after that almost made me cry because for the first time in my life, I think I genuinely hurt him. He whispered, "I would never hurt you." But honestly, I didn't know what to believe anymore. That night I barely slept again. Around 3 a.m. I heard my parents arguing downstairs. At first it was muffled, but then I heard my mom crying loudly. I quietly opened my bedroom door and heard her say, "She's going to hate us forever." Then my dad answered something I'll never forget. He said, "I can live with that as long as she stays safe." Safe from what? I remember sitting on the floor outside my room shaking because none of this made sense anymore. If my dad really did something horrible, why did he sound genuinely terrified for me? Why did my mom still love him? Why didn't anyone just tell me the full truth? The next morning things got even worse. I went downstairs and found my dad sitting alone at the kitchen table holding a thick stack of papers. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept at all. The second he saw me, he pushed the papers toward me and quietly said, "If you're going to hate me, at least know everything first." My hands shook as I sat down. The papers were police reports, medical records, court documents, and printed emails from 16 years ago. At first it just looked like legal chaos between my biological mother and my parents. But then I found something horrifying buried inside one of the reports. My biological mother had accused her drug dealer boyfriend, my biological father, of threatening to sell me for money while she was pregnant. I actually felt sick reading it. According to the reports, he was violent, deeply involved with drugs, and disappeared after she refused to stay with him. Then my dad quietly said something that completely changed the story again. "The man Rachel thinks is innocent almost got your mother killed multiple times." Apparently my biological father returned weeks before my biological mother died demanding money and partial custody. My dad claimed he showed up high repeatedly, threatened my family, and terrified everyone. He insisted the reason he was at the party the night she overdosed was because my biological mother begged him for help after her ex showed up again. He admitted they fought outside because he wanted her to leave with him and go somewhere safe, but she refused. Then he looked directly at me and said, I left because I thought she was sober. If I knew she was using again, I never would have walked away. For the first time since all this started, he sounded genuinely broken instead of defensive. And honestly, I wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. Then he handed me one final document. A restraining order request filed by my biological mother only days before she died. Against my biological father. Not my dad. Attached to it was a handwritten note from her saying she feared he would do something terrible if he lost access to me permanently. My head felt like it was splitting apart because suddenly the entire story flipped again. Was Rachel wrong? Or was my dad manipulating evidence? I didn't know anymore. I genuinely didn't know who the villain was. Then my dad quietly told me the one thing he'd hidden all these years that completely shattered me. He said, your biological father was released from prison last month. My stomach dropped instantly. Prison? For what? My dad swallowed hard before answering. Attempted murder. I felt cold all over. Apparently after my biological mother died, he attacked another dealer during a violent drug dispute and disappeared for years afterward. My dad said he kept the truth from me because he was terrified that someday this man would come looking for me. Suddenly everything felt different again. The overprotectiveness. The secrecy. The fear. It wasn't just guilt. It might have been terror. Then my dad looked me directly in the eyes and said something that made every hair on my body stand up. Rachel contacted you because someone else has been asking about you too. I whispered, who? And my dad answered, your biological father knows you exist now. At that exact moment, somebody knocked on the front door. And when my dad looked through the window, I watched the color completely disappear from his face. My dad didn't move for a few seconds. He just stood there staring through the little glass window beside the front door like he'd seen a ghost. I remember my entire body locking up because I had never seen genuine fear on his face like that before. Not nervousness. Not stress. Fear. The kind that makes somebody look physically sick. My mom came into the hallway behind him and instantly covered her mouth when she looked outside. That reaction alone terrified me more than anything Rachel ever said. Then my dad slowly turned toward me and whispered, go upstairs. Right now. But before I could move, the knocking came again. Louder this time. 3 slow heavy knocks that echoed through the entire house. My heart started slamming against my ribs so hard it hurt. I should have listened to my dad. I know that now. But after days of lies and secrets and manipulation, I was done being controlled. So instead of going upstairs, I walked straight toward the door before either of my parents could stop me. My dad grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and hissed, you don't understand. But I pulled away and unlocked the door anyway. And the second I opened it, my entire world changed again. The man standing there looked nothing like I expected. For some reason, I imagined some terrifying monster from a crime documentary. But instead, he looked normal. Mid-30s maybe. Tired eyes. Dark hair. Slight beard. He wore an old gray hoodie and looked nervous more than dangerous. But the second he saw me, his expression completely broke apart emotionally. His eyes instantly filled with tears. He whispered, oh my God, like he couldn't believe I was real. Then he said my name softly, and hearing it from a stranger made my skin crawl. Behind me, my mom started crying immediately while my dad stepped forward aggressively and snapped, you need to leave. The man ignored him completely. He couldn't stop staring at me. And honestly, that scared me more than yelling would've. Then he said something that hit me like a truck. You look exactly like her. My biological mother. I knew instantly that's who he meant. For a second nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then he slowly reached into his jacket pocket, and my dad instantly shoved me behind him. The movement happened so fast it startled all of us. My biological father froze and slowly pulled out a photograph. That's all. Just an old faded photograph. He held it carefully like it was the most important thing he owned. I came to give her this, he said quietly. My dad looked furious, but I stepped around him and took the photo anyway. It was a picture of my biological mother holding me as a baby while laughing at something off camera. But unlike the hospital pictures I'd already seen, this one felt real. Happy. Human. She looked alive instead of tragic. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "For our daughter someday." My throat tightened instantly. I stared at the picture so long I almost forgot everyone else was there. Then my biological father quietly said, "She carried that everywhere." My dad immediately snapped, "You don't get to pretend you cared now." And just like that, the tension exploded again. The two men started arguing so viciously I honestly thought they might attack each other. My biological father accused my dad of stealing me and manipulating the family. My dad accused him of abusing my biological mother and destroying her life. My mom kept screaming for them to stop while I stood there trapped between two completely different versions of reality. Then my biological father suddenly yelled something that silenced everyone instantly. "Tell her how her mother really died." My stomach dropped. My dad went completely still. My biological father pointed at him and shouted, "Tell her you lied to the police." The air in the room felt electric. Dangerous. I looked at my dad waiting for him to deny it immediately, but he didn't. That silence shattered me. My dad slowly sat down like his legs stopped working. My mom started crying harder than I'd ever seen before. Then finally, after 16 years of lies and half-truths and secrets, the real story finally came out. And honestly, it was worse than anything I imagined. The night my biological mother died, she wasn't alone after the party. After my dad left, she called him again crying and begging for help because my biological father showed up high and violent. My dad went back to the apartment to get me out safely. When he arrived, my biological parents were screaming at each other while I was crying in another room. According to my dad, my biological father shoved my mother during the fight, and she hit her head against a table. But she was still conscious afterward. Still talking. Still alive. Then things spiraled out of control. Drugs were everywhere in the apartment. My biological father panicked and disappeared. My dad called an ambulance anonymously because he was terrified police would find me there surrounded by drugs and violence. Then he took me and left before authorities arrived. I remember staring at him in disbelief while he quietly admitted the next part. He never told police he was there. He never told anyone about the fight. He let people believe the overdose story because he thought the truth would drag me into years of court cases, media attention, and possibly even custody battles with dangerous people connected to my biological father. My biological mother died at the hospital hours later from a combination of overdose complications and the head injury. My biological father started screaming that my dad was lying, but my mom suddenly shouted, "Stop," so loudly the entire house went silent again. Then through tears she whispered the sentence that finally explained everything. Nobody was trying to steal her, we were trying to save her. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Anger. Relief. Grief. Confusion. It all crashed together at once until I felt numb. My biological father kept insisting my parents manipulated the story to keep me, while my dad admitted they absolutely hid things from me for years because they wanted me to have a normal childhood. Then my biological father looked at me and quietly said, "I know I've done horrible things. But I came here because you deserve the choice to know where you come from." And honestly, that broke me completely. Because for the first time, nobody sounded fully evil anymore. Just damaged. Broken people making terrible decisions around one little kid who never understood any of it. Then my biological father said something that changed everything one final time. He admitted Rachel lied to me about several details because she blamed my parents for my biological mother's death and wanted revenge against them. She'd been obsessed with exposing my family for years. My dad even showed me old messages proving Rachel repeatedly threatened to destroy our family if they kept hiding the truth. Suddenly the story became even uglier because there wasn't one villain. There were just traumatized adults poisoning each other for 16 years while I grew up in the middle of it without knowing. Eventually my biological father left peacefully. Before leaving, he looked at me one last time and said, "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I never forgot about you." Then he walked away. And honestly, watching him leave felt strangely heartbreaking even after everything. Because no matter what he'd done, part of me knew I had just looked into the face of someone connected to me forever. The next few weeks were awful. Absolutely awful. I barely spoke to anyone. I started therapy. My parents finally answered questions honestly for the first time in my life, even when the answers made them look terrible. And yeah, I was furious at them for hiding everything from me. But I also slowly realized something painful. Parenthood isn't always clean or perfect or heroic. Sometimes people make desperate decisions out of fear and love at the same time. My parents lied because they were terrified of losing me. My biological mother lied because she was drowning in addiction and desperation. My biological father lied because he was violent and unstable and ashamed of himself. Every adult in my life failed me in different ways. But the weirdest part? After all of this, I still call my parents mom and dad. Because despite the lies, despite the secrets, despite everything, they were the ones who stayed. They raised me. They protected me in the only ways they knew how, even when those choices became toxic and wrong. And honestly, I think that's the hardest truth I had to accept. Love and damage can exist together sometimes. A few days ago, my mom finally gave me the last box of things that belonged to my biological mother. Photos. Journals. Tiny little notes she wrote about me as a baby. One note said, "I hope someday she knows I tried." And when I read that, I cried harder than I had through this entire nightmare because suddenly she stopped feeling like some tragic mystery and started feeling real. Human. Just a broken girl who loved her daughter but couldn't save herself. But if there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that family secrets don't stay buried forever. They grow in the dark until eventually they explode and hurt everyone around them. And trust me, sometimes the truth changes you forever. If you made it this far, comment what you would have done in my situation. Would you forgive your parents after something like this? And if you've ever had a family secret completely change your life, I honestly want to hear your story too.